The national debt has officially surpassed $39 trillion.
Even more disturbing than that, our net interest payments are running up the problem.
America has enemies. You have been told who they are: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. The axis of adversaries building alliances, developing weapons, and plotting against American power from every corner of the globe. And those threats are real. This channel has covered every single one of them. But here's the question that almost nobody in Washington is willing to ask out loud. What if the greatest threat to American power is not coming from Moscow, Beijing, or Tehran? What if it's coming from Washington itself? What if the people driving America into one unwinnable war after another, with no exit strategy, no plan for what comes next, and no concern whatsoever for the bill being handed to every American taxpayer? What if they are the most dangerous force operating against American interests in the world today? Because here is what the numbers say, and the numbers do not lie. The United States national debt just surpassed $39 trillion. The Iran war alone is costing American taxpayers an estimated $2 billion every single day it continues. A Harvard policy expert has stated on the record that the total cost of the Iran conflict, including veteran care, disability benefits, and weapons replacement over the next 30 years, will exceed $1 trillion. $1 trillion. For a war that had no exit strategy on day one? Stay with me, because this video is not about politics, it's about math. And the math is telling a story that should alarm every American regardless of who they voted for. Welcome to Your World Exposed, where we take the story the mainstream gives you and show you the side they deliberately left out. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment when this video is done. We read every single one. Let us get into it. To understand America's real number one enemy, you have to understand a pattern that has been playing out for over 60 years. It starts with a name most Americans under 40 have never heard: Robert McNamara. McNamara was the U.S. Secretary of Defense under President Kennedy and Johnson. He was the architect of America's escalation in Vietnam. He pushed the country into a war that lasted 19 years and 5 months, killed over 58,000 American soldiers, and cost hundreds of billions of dollars that were never paid back, just added to the national debt. Before he died, McNamara finally admitted they were wrong. He admitted that the entire premise that Vietnam was a necessary war to stop Soviet expansion was built on a misreading of the situation. He said on camera that they simply got it wrong. 19 years, 58,000 dead, hundreds of billions spent, and then an admission that the whole thing was a mistake? Now fast forward to 2002. Dick Cheney stood before Congress and told America that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, that Saddam Hussein posed an imminent threat, that this would be over in weeks, not months, that democracy would flourish in the Middle East and the entire region would be transformed. George W. Bush fired his own economic advisor, Larry Lindsey, for predicting the Iraq war might cost $200 billion. They called that estimate alarmist. They called it politically inconvenient. The Iraq war ultimately cost $5 trillion, and it lasted 8 years. $5 trillion. 8 years. And the weapons of mass destruction were never found because they never existed. The same people who were wrong about Vietnam were wrong about Iraq. The same thinking of it sent 58,000 Americans to die in Southeast Asia, sent 4,500 Americans to die in a desert looking for weapons that were not there. And here's the pattern that should concern you most. Nobody was held accountable. Nobody resigned in disgrace. Nobody went to prison. The architects of those decisions simply moved on to think tanks, to speaking fees, to television commentary, where they continued to advocate for the next intervention. Because the same playbook that produced Vietnam and Iraq is now producing the Iran war, in 2002, Benjamin Netanyahu testified before the United States Congress and said that Iraq was developing nuclear weapons and that removing Saddam Hussein would have enormous positive reverberations across the region. He was wrong. The weapons did not exist. The reverberations were chaos. In 2026, the same arguments from the same voices drove the United States into a war with Iran, and the bill is arriving faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit. The Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that in the first 100 hours of the Iran war, the United States spent $3.7 billion. Most of that was munitions replacement alone. In those first 4 days, the U.S. fired more Patriot missiles than it had provided to Ukraine over 4 years. The cost ratio of this conflict is staggering. For every Iranian drone that cost approximately $30,000 to build, the United States spent over $1 million to shoot it down. $1 million to destroy a $30,000 drone? The cost ratio is 106 to 1. The war's costing an estimated $2 billion per day. The U.S. national debt surpassed $39 trillion just weeks into the conflict. And a Harvard public policy expert has stated with certainty that when you include long-term veteran care, disability benefits for 55,000 American troops deployed, and weapons replacement costs over the next 30 years, the total bill will exceed $1 trillion. $1 trillion borrowed, added to a national debt that is already doubling every 14 years from interest alone. And here's what makes all of that even worse. The United States defense budget for 2026 is $838 billion, the largest in American history, more than the next 9 countries in the world combined. China spent approximately $300 billion, Russia spent between $126 and $149 billion. America is spending on defense more than the next 9 countries combined and still firing missiles that cost $1 million each to shoot down $30,000 drones. Now let us look at the strategic picture that almost nobody in mainstream media is discussing. What if this is not just a series of unrelated conflicts? What if Russia, Iran, China, and their partners have identified American fundamental weaknesses? The neocon compulsion to fight on every front simultaneously and are deliberately exploiting it. Consider the scenario. Iran goads the United States into a costly air war that drains America's precision munition stockpiles at an extraordinary rate. Russia simultaneously intensifies its campaign in Ukraine, knowing that American weapons manufacturing cannot keep pace with wartime consumption. North Korea invades South Korea, and China moves on Taiwan. 4 fronts simultaneously. There is no possible way to defend on 4 fronts at once. Not with the current stockpile, not with the current manufacturing rates, the munitions used against Iran alone will take years to replace. The Patriot missiles fired in the first 4 days of that conflict represented years of production capacity. Sun Tzu understood this 2,500 years ago. There is no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. He said that in 412 BC. The question is not whether America's military is powerful enough to win any single engagement. It clearly is. The question is whether America can sustain simultaneous engagements across 4 theaters against adversaries who are coordinating their actions and deliberately targeting America's financial and logistical limits. And the answer to that question is what the neocons have never had the strategic honesty to address. Because the cost of these wars is not abstract, it is not a number on a screen. It lands on every American in ways that mainstream media rarely connect to the wars being fought. The Iran conflict pushed the average price of gasoline in the United States to $4.23 per gallon in late April 2026, a 40% increase from before the war. Diesel and jet fuel prices drove up the cost of everything that moves in America. Uber costs are up 25% on average. Food, shipping, travel, heating, the bill from the Strait of Hormuz crisis lands in every American household every month, on top of the $1 trillion military tab. And there is a longer bill coming. The national debt doubles from interest alone every 14 years at current rates. That means higher taxes, higher borrowing costs for mortgages and car loans, lower wages, and businesses have less capital to invest, fewer resources for every domestic priority, infrastructure, healthcare, education, because interest payments on war debt are consuming an ever larger share of every federal dollar collected. The people who never served. who never paid for the wars they started, who collected speaking fees and board seats while the bills came due, they walked away. The rest of America pays. Now, let us be clear about something, because this channel does not do propaganda and a complete picture requires honesty. America does face real threats. Russia's military ambitions are real. China's challenge to American dominance in the Pacific is real. Iran's nuclear program and regional aggression are real. North Korea's expanding missile capability is real. This is not an argument for isolationism. It is not an argument that America should abandon its allies or retreat from the world. It is an argument for strategy, for asking the question that the neocons have never answered. What comes after? What is the exit? What does success look like, and how do we get there without bankrupting the country that is supposed to be defending the free world? Vietnam had no answer to that question. Iraq had no answer. And right now, the Iran war has no clear answer either. Wanting America to be strong is not the same as wanting America to be reckless. And the difference between those two things is exactly what a strategy is for. The mainstream tells you to watch Russia, watch China, watch Iran, watch North Korea. And they are right that those nations pose real challenges that demand serious responses. But here's what the mainstream is not telling you. The national debt just hit $39 trillion. The Iran war is costing $2 billion a day. The weapons replacement timeline stretches years into the future. A Harvard expert says the total bill will exceed $1 trillion. And the same political faction that produced Vietnam and Iraq, that has never had an exit strategy for a single conflict they started, is still in the rooms where these decisions get made. Sun Tzu said it 2,500 years ago, and nobody in Washington has proven him wrong yet. There is no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. The enemy that scares the mainstream is the one with missiles and armies on the other side of the world. The enemy that should scare you is the one with no exit strategy, no accountability, and a $39 trillion credit card that your children are going to spend their lives paying off. That enemy does not have a foreign accent. It has a Washington address. This is your world exposed. The story is never what they tell you it is. If this changed how you think about who America's real threats are, drop a comment right now. Tell us, do you think Washington will ever hold the architects of these wars accountable? We want to hear where you stand, and do not forget to hit subscribe because we are just getting started.